Well, hello and welcome. Another edition of USA Wrestling's Heads Up podcast. I'm Mike Haggerty, alongside with Mike Clayton, and we have two very special guests with us today. We have both Emma Randall and Sarah Dwyer-Shick. And man, I can't tell you, Mike, this is going to be a fun one.
Oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this one for weeks, and so have they. So that, if that gives you any idea how tough it is sometimes to get the behind the scenes going. So thanks both for you for being here. I'm going to introduce Emma a little personally first. Sarah, if you don't mind. Emma is one of my favorite people in the world, let alone in wrestling. Emma was our first female certified gold coach in USA Wrestling history in 2016, earning her gold certification. Just like Mr. Haggerty over here used to do my job and did a lot better than I did.
No way.
And so it was really awesome because that was early on in my career when I got here in about 14, meeting you and watching you go through that progression and watching and have really kind of rely on you to help us form how we did silver and gold tasks. So I'm just jazzed to get a chance to spend some time with you today. And maybe I thought you could do a little bit more interviewing or introducing of Sarah from the Sports Bra Project. And Sarah, I wanted to throw a little personal revelation in here. About 3 years ago, I got to do a wrestling clinic in American Samoa. And while we were working with the kids, one of the things that came up was that a lot of the girls, because it was a lot of the people there are a little bigger, a lot of the girls just didn't feel like they could get into wrestling or get into sports because they just didn't have the basic equipment that they needed. And that basic equipment in wrestling for them was a sports bra and in a lot of other sports. And it was the first time that I'd really heard of this project. And that's me announcing my ignorance to the problems that women have faced. So I'm hoping and I'm sure that today I'm going to be a lot less ignorant after this call. So Emma, if you could introduce Sarah and let us know a little bit about how you guys got hooked up, and then we can kind of jump in.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Mike, for that kind introduction. I've been definitely blessed to have you as a mentor for years now. I first met Sarah when I had first started with Beat the Streets New York City. We shared an office space with several other sports-based youth development organizations, and Sarah was making around, just saying hi and introducing herself to each of the different sports and organizations and different needs, and just letting them know that she was available to talk further and see if there was a need within that organization for more resources, including sports bras. And from the moment I sat down with her, she was super interested in the sport of wrestling, interested in how sports bras might differ for wrestlers as opposed to other sports. She's been responsive and always helping and providing new sports bras to our student athletes, checking in on them, making sure that they're receiving it, that it's part of their equipment package, that there's no pressure on them to feel uncomfortable about receiving one, helping out with just how can I be a better coach and leader and help other coaches feel comfortable broaching the subject of sports bras and realizing that it's a huge issue, and it's a barrier to sport, and that we could be more helpful and more inclusive. And so Sarah has definitely opened my eyes to those kinds of issues and kind of directed me on how I could help in different areas too. So I've been very lucky to know her. Beat the Streets New York City has directly benefited from her, and this spring she's giving like 1,000 sports bras to Beat the Streets National in all 11 cities. So it's been pretty incredible. We're very fortunate to have bumped into you at Vita, which doesn't even exist anymore, but it was definitely one of the best things that could happen.
This is really exciting. One of the best things that we hope to come from the podcast is this concept of how networking and how relationships attack these problems. And Sarah, how did this kind of start up with you? I know you've got a background, high school athlete, collegiate athlete, and got into the coaching world, but how did this relationship forming kind of work for you?
I think it just kind of grew organically, to be honest. Coming through, I'm a Title IX baby, so I would have killed to be able to wrestle as a kid, but that was certainly not available in the 70s and 80s as I was starting out. So this is amazing for me to be here at an organization that has so many women involved, and Emma's been tremendous. But through soccer travel, soccer is sort of the international game, and I've gotten to work with different coaches and athletes from different places. Being able to travel, you saw that there were still barriers for girls and women participating in sports, and they look different in New York City than they do in rural Uganda, but they tend to fall under sort of three main areas, which we usually try to address, which is the cultural, the stigma about it. Girls just don't play. And there's the economics. If resources are really stressed and girls don't play, now you're getting two components coming into it, because that's not where the resources will go when you have to worry about a roof over your head. And then logistics too. There are areas in some very rural communities where there is not a Walmart, a Target, and Amazon, believe it or not, doesn't deliver everywhere. Much as we think Jeff Bezos runs the world now, he does not deliver everywhere. So those are the three areas that we address. Because we can't be experts everywhere, we rely on the organizations that we partner with. And that collaboration for us has been absolutely amazing for me to learn more from Emma about wrestling, and for me to learn more about some wheelchair athletes that we've worked with, or for me to learn more about lots of other organizations, and they're each dealing with their populations and specific demographics, and they understand their population better than I ever could. If I went into a rural village in Uganda, they're kind of going to be looking at who's this short little white New Yorker, and why is she telling me what to do? And it doesn't, but when it comes from somebody in their community who understands the culture and understands whether it's a support issue or whether it's a modesty issue, it really makes it that personal connection. And for us, we learn a lot from it too. So it's been a lot of fun on those collaborations, and it just kind of grew from that experience, and kind of being frustrated with having the same conversations over and over again, and having girls and women dropping out at the same ages that we've been talking about for the last 40 years. We lose them at puberty, or we lose them as their bodies start to change. And everyone's like, oh, well, we have to empower them. I'm like, well, yeah, but we also have to address their needs, and we have to normalize their experiences. So that's a lot of what we do. The bra meets the physical need, but normalizing those experiences and those needs is really the bigger part of the conversation.
So if I'm a coach and I'm listening to this, and maybe I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety now, yes. There's some things that I'm unfamiliar with. We're talking touchy-feely, we're talking boobies, we're talking bras. Like I'm a little nervous right now. So why is it important that we talk about this for all the coaches that are listening? Why should they listen and keep listening? Because this is important. This isn't just about getting a girl into a wrestling outfit and getting her on the mat. This is a lot deeper. And I appreciate that. What I've learned by researching what you guys are doing, I'm learning that I'm going to turn.
That's like that's the perfect question. And you're not the only one who's uncomfortable. And I would say a lot of the girls, especially in the younger ages, get uncomfortable. And if they're uncomfortable, their coaches are uncomfortable. Now it's just a conversation you're never going to have. So by making it normal, treating the sports bra as a piece of equipment. When you order a singlet, when we order soccer jerseys or shin guards, why aren't we ordering sports bras? I think that's a topic we could delve into as to, when the leadership was all male, they don't recognize that there may be a need. It's something that they didn't grow up with. So I think that normalizing that conversation and then being able to get comfortable. You don't need to, we're not talking about Victoria's Secret. And if there's a male coach who doesn't want to go into in-depth with a female athlete, that's okay. But knowing that this is her need, this is a need that she has, having somebody within the organization that she's comfortable with and normalizes it. Just ordering it and being handed a bra with your singlet makes it normal. I think, or handed it with your uniform just makes it a normal part of it, instead of being an extra something that you have to do on your own because you're a girl and you're different. It's just now normalized as part of your equipment. And I think for us, there was an event we were at for soccer coaches, and we were collecting bras. And we saw these two guys kind of circling the table for a while. And then we presented it and we put it out there as a piece of equipment. And all they really need to start as an entry point is think about sizing like a t-shirt. So small, medium, large, extra large. There's obviously more nuance to it, especially as you get to larger athletes. But at a basic level, you're thinking of, a piece of equipment that's sized like a t-shirt. And as soon as we presented it, these two guys made a beeline to our table and we're like, okay, we want to bring this to our club. And now we can talk about it. So sometimes it's just giving coaches the language to say, look, this is a thing. We're going to provide sports bras. I don't need to know your size. We're not going to talk about your size necessarily. But when you put down your uniform order, put down your sports bra size and include that in there.
Sarah and Emma, both. My question is, and I think that other coaches would probably want to ask this question, so I will ask it. Do you see the sports bra as definitely tactical? It is part of the equipment, but do you see it representative of a bigger picture and for what sports and women actually represent?
I do. I don't know if you want to tackle that first, Emma. I'm sure we could go on this one for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And we have some time, so be patient with us and go ahead and however you want to attack that. Do you see it as a bigger issue, or is it just simply part of the equipment and this is what you guys do? But deep down inside, I get the gut feeling that this definitely is a representative of something much bigger.
Yeah, to me, it's mobility, it's access, it's protection, it's confidence, being able to move without fearing that something's going to happen or that you're exposed. There's coverage, so you're also feeling safe. Like a singlet is revealing, so it's nice to know that like there's coverage. And I don't know, I just feel like it's access, right? Like access to play, it's access to finding my confident self, my healthy body, all of those kinds of things. I think it's an empowerment piece within itself. And I love the fact that we can include it in a package for our kids, because sometimes not only is their coach uncomfortable, but so are their parents or their siblings, and so like we're kind of making that conversation a little bit easier for everyone. Like, so here's your shoes, here's your shirt, here's your singlet, here's your sports bra. And kind of like handing that off, and it's like just a subtle way to like let them know that they're different, right? Like you're not handing a sports bra to a guy, but also respecting that there are differences, but we're making a space for you, and we want you to be here, and we want you to bring your best, most confident self.
Coach Haggerty, you've got some daughters. Like, as they started to participate in sports, was that time? I remember buying the first sports bra for my stepdaughter, and I was just like, okay, fake it. It's not a big deal. Just go into the store. Here's some shoes. Here's a candy bar, sports bra. Like I just faked it and pretended like it wasn't a big deal. And I think she appreciated that. Coach Haggerty, how was that with your daughters?
Absolutely. They're definitely having, 3 daughters, 2 of which were very active in sport, and even the third was somewhat active at times in sport. There are those barriers that I don't think that we were very well equipped for, and having open dialogue in regards to this is so important. I'm still learning as a dad of a 30-plus-year-old, and another one that just finished sport, who is a diver and cheerleader at Maryville University, and so it's been a challenge at times. But at the same time, I definitely think a lot of the barriers and stigma are being continually broken down by, advocates like Emma and Sarah, and bringing this information out in front of people to say, hey, let's have some open and intelligent conversation about if we are truly going to try to empower female athletes, what does that look like? So this is to me is really, really important. And I love just having the conversations. But to be honest with you, I probably failed more with my daughter than I did with my son. I challenged my daughter one time, and this is a story that probably should take a little bit longer and should be spent at a different time and place. But I've got to share this one with you since you brought it up. My daughter actually was a wrestler for a while, and she was pretty darn good. And she actually placed, I think, 2nd or 3rd in the district championships, and was getting ready for the regional competition, which is a qualification for state. She was like 9 years old, 9 or 10, maybe 9, I think. But anyway, so her practice was right before our practice, or right after our practice of the high school team. So I just finished with the high school team. The little kids are coming into our room, and Mariah comes up to me, and she was getting ready for practice, and her mom brings her in tacos to eat before practice. And so she looks at me, and I looked at those tacos, and I said, sweetheart, you can't have tacos before practice. I'll put these aside and you can have them later. And I've got a bar here you can eat, something that's not going to make you throw up during practice. I said, this is not a good look. And she she kind of held her ground and she said, no, I'm hungry. I want the tacos. So the great coach that I am, and dealing with a female athlete who had much more probably drive than half of the guys that I ever coached, I decided to draw that line in the sand too. And I said, sweetheart, it's either the tacos now, or we're going to have you're done. You're not going to get to practice and your career's over. Because I figured there's no way that she would stand up to me on that. She looked me right in the eye, crossed her arms and said, I want my tacos. And that was the end of her career. So if you talk about coaching, pedagogy, development, all of that, and how to deal with athletes, I blew it. And so one of the greatest coaching failures of all time, dad coach, I challenged my daughter when she was 9 years old to make a decision, put her in a corner, and she stood up to me and said, I'm done. And so she went on and had great careers in other sports, but I totally blew it with her. So don't ask me a question like that ever again on a podcast about dealing with female athletes, because that's what I did. But circle it all back and make sense of it. I truly believe just having the conversations and opening up about what, how is it different? How is it similar when dealing with our female athletes? And we certainly have had our fair share in the Blue Springs community. Allie Hauk comes from Blue Springs. We've had several other girls that have competed at the collegiate level, but I really admire what's taking place in today's movement with Coach Steiner and what Emma, you blazed a trail, Clarissa and others are doing. So again, I think that the big picture here is just, where does it go next? What are we missing right now when it comes to involvement and trying to help coaches help their athletes? That's the question.
I think we've done like a great job of welcoming women into the wrestling room compared to, when I started my own career, or, our first world team members in the early 90s, right? Like the experience and having those welcoming doors and seeing pictures of themselves and realizing that there's role models and there's opportunities and those kinds of things that exist, right? But there's all these like small barriers that exist that we're just not quite aware of yet. We've started to open doors, but there's still, different issues that pop up that we haven't tackled. And I think that's the next places that it goes. We start to realize, what competition schedules are probably best fit to help our women learn freestyle and experience that so that they're prepared for college. We start to understand menstrual cycles and figuring out that tampons are also a piece of equipment and can just be added to your medical bag and magically it's taken care of. Sports bras, hijabs. Maybe you want to wear spandex. Some coaches like when their athletes wear spandex underneath of their clothes. That's fine, but also making those same kind of rules for the guys. So I think there's like little bumps, but we've opened some bigger doors, right? And are making it accessible. Now it's just like, how do we make an experience something that's super positive that they're going to continue to come back? Because like Sarah said, over 50% of females drop out of sport at puberty. Whether that's because they're growing and now they're uncomfortable in their own body, their breasts are growing, or we start to sexualize the sport, and we're wearing singlets in wrestling that might feel a little bit too revealing to mom and dad, right? Maybe they have to choose between watching a sibling at home or getting a job or playing sport, and their parent needs that money, right? There's all these different barriers that these girls are taking care of and are losing sport. And we can do a better job of making sure that their experience is positive by creating a positive environment, inviting those extra family members to come and be a part of practice, by, finding them a job that works with their wrestling schedule instead of during it. There's a lot of stuff that we can do just to make it smooth and to make them feel like they're a huge part of this team and we want them in our family.
Emma, I've always wondered too, and Sarah, please, chime in as well, but I've always wondered, should we be adjusting the singlet for women? I mean, is that something, because I know that was always an argument for some of the male athletes, that it's almost too revealing. So there's that discussion, would it increase high school wrestling participation if they used a different jersey type? Yeah. And so is that something that should be addressed, or is that something that
Have you checked out like the research that was done by ESPNW on women in uniforms?
no, I
So
have not. Please share.
younger athletes, and this is on the male side too, but younger athletes feel, and less experienced athletes feel more uncomfortable in a uniform than more experienced and high profile athletes, right? So when a kid is first coming into the sport, I add stress and anxiety and fear and like this worry of comparison when I put them in something revealing in their uniform, or I make them wear that. And so what we do at Beat the Streets is we provide shorts and t-shirts for the kids, right? I never want a kid to be like, I'm not wearing that singlet for them to be the reason that they're not coming out. And who cares, right? Like they're 6 to 12, they can wear shorts and t-shirts. And for our high school kids, it's the same thing. If you told me that you are uncomfortable, then cool, wear shorts and a t-shirt. You're uncomfortable still, like let's get some two-piece singlets. You're uncomfortable still, or your religious beliefs say that you should be covered, cool, let's find a way to make it work. Like you can't tell me that like the uniform should be restrictive. I think as coaches, it's our job to find a way to make it work, right? Like wrestling is wrestling, and we believe our sport can change lives. And so how do I help them feel more comfortable in their own skin? You know, how do I make them feel valued, and that it's not too revealing and it fits coverage the right way? Like, you know, even myself, like if you put me in a tight fit shirt, I probably am going to start to change my body language, and I'm going to recluse. I don't know if you guys saw some of the pictures from the captain stuff. I was in like a double XL t-shirt that was like spandex on me, and I absolutely cannot stand the pictures in that. I'm embarrassed by them, right? Like it changed who I was and the way I presented myself because of what I was wearing. And so can we make this sport easier and more accepting? And I don't think it's just the girls who want looser fitting clothing, or to have options of like, do I want to wear the singlet? Do I want to be in a two-piece? Do I want to have a little bit more coverage? Fine, like let's give them options to fit where they're comfortable, because our sport is losing participants. And so why wouldn't we do everything in our power to make it easy for them to join and stay?
So what's the resolve? What's the bottom line?
You give them options.
Give them options.
I think what's interesting to me hearing this on the wrestling side is how similar the conversations are with so many different sports. Like last week or 2 weeks ago, the German gymnastics team just came out and wore a unitard, which was absolutely beautiful. And it was something that completely, it's going to be a conversation for a long time. And I thought it was about time and looked amazing. Power to the athletes for figuring out something that made them more comfortable. So hearing like Emma and you, I'll talk about the specifics to wrestling. It's very similar conversations that we have in almost every sport. Like in using soccer, which is where my primary background is, you know, even on the coaching side of it, being given coaching gear that fits tells me that I'm part of the coaching staff, where I have to get into a men's coaching outfit. The polo shirt tucks below my shorts. And then it's, you know, it doesn't fit right. And it's not that there's anything wrong with my body, but because the uniform, no matter what I do with it, I'm a towering 5'4" in shoes with curves. So a straight cut men's small is not going to hit me correctly. And if I wear a medium, I'm going to be wearing a 10. You could put 5 of me in it. So even just for the athletes, especially starting at the athlete level and then working all the way up through the coaches and any staffing, having gear that fits and is appropriate. And that may mean adjusting cuts. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a female cut and a male cut. I've seen some organizations that have used a curvy cut and a straight cut, because some guys are a little curvy too. And some women are built very straight and traditionally more male-like. I'm not one of them, but there are tons of women that I played with who are. So, and then having the choice of which uniform fits you best. Are you one who is, you know, are you bigger and up top and smaller in the legs, which is the traditional male, or are you the opposite with a woman? And I think having those available gives them the choices and makes them comfortable. And all those little things, as you called them, little things, Emma, they're so little, but they're not. They're all those little cues that you don't belong. You don't belong because there aren't tampons in med kits. So if you happen to get your period while you're at a meet, what do? And your coach is male, and maybe you're a 12-year-old and your other friends haven't brought feminine products with you. Why aren't they just in the med kit? And then the coach doesn't have to talk about it. Hand in the med kit. They go off to the bathroom. They bring a friend. That's fine, and it's taken care of. But those little things just give, I think, a lot of young girls, especially, the idea that, well, it's not normal still, because I have to make all these accommodations to make sure that I can I have to prepare to make sure that I'm ready if my period comes. I have to make sure the clothes sort of fit, but they're never really going to fit because they're not cut for me. All those little clues just kind of say, well, you don't really belong. So the bra is just one way that we can start addressing that by saying, yeah, the bra is a normal piece of equipment, just like your singlet, just like your socks for another sport. And it's normal. And yes, if a guy wants to wear a bra, by all means he can, but it is specific usually for the female athlete, both for support and for modesty, especially in a lot of communities. Like, I think of it as support. I never thought of it as a modesty factor. I'm not Dolly Parton, I wear it for practicality purposes, we'll be honest. And yes, you can laugh at this. I've gotten more comfortable talking about bras than I ever thought I would be. And when the first bras I gave out were in Namibia, and the woman I gave them to was running a soccer program, and she said, well, yes, and it's shameful. And I'm looking at her going, what are you talking about? She's like, well, if you're bouncing, you're seen as promiscuous, and that's shameful to you, and it's shameful to your family. And in a small village or a small community, that's a big impact. And it opened my eyes to see that, okay, so there's not just the physical support, but there's that modesty coverage piece that really, as Emma said, it impacts how you stand. The shirt's too tight, but it's way too long. So am I going to stand like this? So you can't, I'm not as comfortable, but then I don't look confident. They're all those little pieces just kind of fold into each other and become a big factor. And I think just addressing them and even talking about them starts to normalize them and lets the girls know that, yeah, you belong. Absolutely. And we're going to do what we can so you know you belong. And you're not an afterthought.
A lot of the focus that we've discussed here in the last 20 minutes or so is about the bra. Mm-hmm. Are there other issues of major concern that it should also demand some conversation with our female athletes?
I think for me, the big one would be standardizing female products in med kits and having them available. I think it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing. And it can have a huge impact because an athlete could potentially not be able to wrestle that day or compete that day or participate that day if the right product was not available. And the other piece is the cut of just general clothing. The general clothing cut is having stuff that fits shorter, curvier frames or different shapes, which I think some of your guys might probably be like as later on as well. They might find that cut fits some of them much better than some of the other things. So having having equipment available to suit multiple body types, not just the ideal male body type from 20 years ago, which a lot of equipment seems to be based on.
Yeah, it's around that.
My husband has a lovely collection of polo shirts from events that I've gone to that I just can't wear. I'm like, great, you've got a great soccer polo shirt collection. I can't wear any of them. And you don't play.
I think another thing is too, right? I 100% agree. The cuts should have different options for curves. Maybe you prefer a higher cut singlet. For a long time, I've seen heavyweights who also have the low cut, whether they're male or female, struggling to keep it pulled up high enough so that things aren't falling out. The deep side, if we just went with a higher cut singlet, I think another issue that is still not quite remedied, but I think there are a couple manufacturers that think about this, but you submit your quad size and you submit different measurements so that singlet actually fits you the way it's supposed to fit you, because you'll see, right, that some people fit it really well and a lot of people don't. I would say a singlet is not flattering on a lot of us. So I think that, and then I think another issue is similar to the tampons, just coaches being aware of menstrual cycles and what it's like, and encouraging healthy weight management tactics while women are on their periods. I think, there's going to be bloating, there's going to be weight gain at some point throughout it, and not everyone's cycle looks the same. And so figuring out how to help girls track their own cycle so they become aware of it. How does that look like, during championship events and we're getting ready and we just need to be aware that we need to be a little bit lighter, or we need to be aware that this is going to take place. And so we're going to have to work a little bit harder to manage the weight. But, I think a lot of coaches turn their head and just pretend that it doesn't matter. And then the girl stop trying to figure it out. And she probably is going to turn to some unhealthy weight management practices to try and get down to weight, as opposed to planning a cycle, recognizing when things are going to happen, and really being diligent and disciplined to, just talk about it, right? Hey, it's about that time of the month. have you already started bloating? Your competition is next Saturday. So how can we help you, change your diet? Maybe we know that you get super dehydrated and you start to get headaches. So can we start to give you extra water right now so that you're in a better position to seed later in the week, and those little things are meaningful, right? It doesn't have to be like a creepy kind of conversation. It's literally just like something that's happening in your body every single month. How do we look at it as like, kind of mad scientists, right? Like to find out the perfect way to perform, because we can't just pretend it's not happening. It definitely is.
And normalizing that conversation, I think, is half of it. So the girls are comfortable with it. If it's such a taboo topic, it's hard for them to bring it up. They may talk among their friends, and, rumor mills of what as like a 13-year-old girl about things are different than what you do. A coach would know who's been educated in that area. So I think even educating coaches as to what to expect, especially male coaches who may not be as familiar with it. It doesn't mean they have to go in an in-depth conversation with them, but understanding it means maybe there's certain questions that they can ask or direct them to somebody who knows how to help them if something's going on. And I think just being aware of it and then having the conversation and starting to use the language will make the girls more comfortable too. And then believe it or not, once they get to college, usually they're more comfortable than guys talking about absolutely anything. But at that delicate area between 11 and like 15, especially maybe an athlete who's either a little heavier or doesn't fit the traditional look, really needs to have that conversation. And it's happening younger and younger. And I think we need to be aware of that. Friend's daughter had her period starting at 11, and to me that blows my mind. It's not thing that was on my radar when I was that age, but we're starting to see that trend sort of across the country, is that girls are getting them younger and younger, which means this isn't a high school issue, this isn't a junior high issue, this is sometimes even a middle school issue, and something that we just need to start being aware of and putting into the conversation. And using resources that you have. If you have female coaches, ask them questions. We're usually happy to answer them. And it can be awkward. We can giggle. That's okay. But we need to have the conversation. And we can make a joke out of it, make people comfortable. But at the same time, the more we talk about it and the more the coaches are comfortable, the more the athletes are comfortable, and the less it's an issue.
I think too, even if you want to like talk about that in your meeting at the beginning of the season with the parents, right? Like, hey, these are the things that I want to know when your daughter's cycle is. These are the questions that I'm probably going to ask, and letting them know, letting the kids know, so that there's like some set boundaries and like direction of why it's important, how it's going to be helpful. If you're uncomfortable, sometimes it's better to like state those in advance, and so that everyone has a little time to prepare. Everyone can talk about what kind of answers.
And admit you're uncomfortable. That's okay. You don't have to be totally comfortable about it. You have to be comfortable bringing it up as a topic. That's like the worst group I ever presented to. The coach giggled the entire time. He was a parent of a 15-year-old girl, and this was a 15-year-old girls team, and we were talking about doing a sports bra drive, and he's giggling, and I'm like, this is really not helping. I'm like, your athletes are now super uncomfortable, and I'm terrified that you've been coaching 15-year-old girls for the last 5 years, and you can't even say sports bra with a straight face. But then the ones that came up at that event and just said, great, now we can talk about it. That's what you want. You don't have to be guys. I don't expect guys to understand a lot of these things innately because they haven't grown up with it, but they need to know to ask the questions, to have at least a few resources that they're comfortable going to, people that they can talk to. I had to go shopping for a cup once. Trust me, this was not in my wheelhouse, but I ended up asking an older gentleman who could help purchase a cup in a way that I've never bought a cup. And so I relied on him as a resource. And doing that and getting past that taboo, I think will go a long way in making sure girls and women are included in sports and then stay in sports. I think some of what we see now as being the taboo is because we don't have as many women in leadership positions. So this isn't part of the director's conversation. These are conversations that happen with athletes, but we don't get, then there's a disconnect with those that are in the leadership roles. And every sport's a little bit different. I know soccer, we see it a lot. There are very few women in I've been the only woman in the room many times. And I think other sports are also very similar. So having women in those rooms so that just becomes, we're ordering uniforms. Let's not order white shorts for the 13-year-old girls. Little things like that. It's not a hard thing, but if there's only guys in the room, they might not think about it. Whereas you have a few women in there and suddenly it's just, great, we'll go with light blue then. Okay. And we move on. And it's not an issue. It just becomes a normal part of the planning and the conversation.
I think Mike's having some trouble with his audio. I'm not real sure what's going on there, but I did have a follow-up, just a quick question, both Sarah and Emma. if somebody had additional questions, if they wanted more information, or they wanted to support the cause of the project, where would they go? How do they attack this from the outside? Because obviously we have a lot of coaches that are going to be tuning in, some other athletes, etc. What do we need to do, and how can we be proactive in this cause?
Well, we're thrilled to be partnering with you guys to do a Sports Bra Drive. Thank you, Emma, for putting that together. So for information on the Sports Bra Project itself, we have a website, and it's simply thesportsbraproject.org. There's information there. There's also links to if a team wants to get involved and host a Sports Bra Drive, which for us has been really fun to watch young athletes take that leadership role and take ownership of a project themselves. Because the worst that happens is they don't collect bras. So it's a really kind of low barrier, high reward if they want to do a sports bra drive amongst their teammates, which has been for us a lot of fun, as I said, to see some of these athletes come up with some really unique ways to collect sports bras from their friends. And then right now, I think the National Beat the Streets has a drive running, and we're doing a virtual drive. Thank you, 2020. We've now learned how to do things virtually. So we have a platform, and we can send, Emma has the link, or it's linked on the site. I'm not sure where it went out. That is to a Beat the Streets page, and with a target goal set for the next week. And there's also, through that campaign, you can also donate by text. So if you do BTS 2021, I think the number is 44321, if I'm remembering that right, to text to donate. So we've opened up, as I said, COVID has done some interesting things and allowed some platforms to sort of develop in really neat ways that we can now engage in this way that we did not before.
Sarah, I think we can also add this to our Facebook page, our group page, any of this information on how to follow up. And if there's additional questions, we can certainly add those to that page. So we appreciate that. Real quick, we'd be totally remiss, Emma, if we didn't talk just a little bit about your new role, or our roles are continually growing at leaps and bounds with your position as administrator and coach out east. And so share a little bit about what you've been doing here recently, and what's ahead for you in the future.
Yeah, thank you. I spent the last 3 years working at Beat the Streets, New York City. I came from the national team. It was definitely a culture shock at first, switching to New York City, and also working with youth. And it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I still love, the kids. I love the city. I love trying new things. It made me rethink my own coaching, right? Because I'd been coaching elite athletes, and so my progressions changed. My micro progressions, the way I scaffold techniques and drills and stuff, has evolved, and I think it's made me a better coach. Coaching athletes who don't look like me have made me a better person and a better individual. They've taught me so much. And just learning from each of their different cultures, and really trying to expand my mind of what's capable and what we can do through the sport of wrestling. And so I've loved that. I am currently the girls head coach and program director. So a lot of it is curriculum building for coaches and for athletes, and for our leadership programs, known as our academy, right? And so it's all been a lot of growing. My new position, I begin on July 1st. I will be the girls head coach at Columbia University for their women's program. They have a small group of women who really want to pursue some elite goals. Columbia is obviously really tough to get into, so they are some bright individuals. And what they're really looking for is somebody to be in their corner and fight for them. Columbia hasn't added women's wrestling as a varsity sport. However, hiring a club coach is a great way to start pushing that and start opening doors and encouraging the Ivy League programs, which almost all of them have women's specific clubs now, to start making it a varsity sport. And so really being on the inside and pushing upward, and creating space for these women to continue to pursue their goals on and off the mat, right? Like, to have a Division I Ivy League education and still be able to do a sport that you love is an incredible opportunity. And so that's what our goal is to provide access to women to get to that next level where they deserve to be, alongside their male counterparts with those kinds of opportunities. In addition, I will be the women's head coach at the New York City RTC. And the real goal there is to make New York City's RTC an epicenter of women's wrestling, right? So reaching out to the New Jersey, the New York girls, the New York City girls, and pulling them in so that our high school student athletes are, grinding against one another and getting better and getting to the top of the podium. To bring together all these universities, we have about 7 universities that are within a 2-hour drive of New York City. Letting those women train together and compete together and grow together, and providing more access to those student athletes, because right now, we don't spend a lot of time co-training. It's mostly you stay within your university, and because there's so many schools and because women's wrestling is still growing, that school might have 1 or 2 hammers, right? And so how do we get those hammers together to get to that next level again and push our national team to continue to be better? And then we'll have some senior level athletes who are trying to get to hopefully the Olympics. And so our goal is to kind of hit New York City wrestling and really provide an extra step. I love what I do with Beat the Streets, but how do I provide access to an education that's going to really change the lives of those student athletes who I care deeply about? How do I help them get to that next level of success? And how do we showcase that you can live right here and achieve your goals at the highest level?
Sarah, give us a little more history and background on yourself before we get out of here. Just what, besides working on the projects, what else have you got going?
Well, first off, Emma, I'm totally psyched that you have that job and that job actually exists now. I am thrilled to see that wrestling is getting into the Ivies and the college, and I could never have even imagined that. Yeah, that is so far from what I grew up seeing. That's very, very cool. And that's, yeah, one of the things this year our focus is on a lot of distributions within the U.S. because there's limited travel, but also on organizations that are highlighting girls and women in non-traditional sports and in roles that we haven't seen. So I'm thrilled. Absolutely.
And if we can't reach Sarah or Emma by phone, we certainly know why. She's like in 5 different places during the day, so we probably won't ever hear from Emma again with all these job titles and roles that she's created. So yeah, definitely good luck to you, Emma. We appreciate what you've done and what you continue to do. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Sarah, give us a little history. Give us some background. What's going on with you besides the Bra Project?
I spent about 15 years coaching college soccer. The last 8 or 10, I've been doing just the youth side. I am actually taking a break from coaching this spring, which is absolutely strange. Something I have not done ever. I thought about it, coaching from the beginning of college when you're, coaching at camps in the summer all the way through now. So it's very weird not having a club or a team, but decided to really focus on taking the Sports Bar Project to the next level to see if we can do that. I'm also going to be working with a group that sort of an education group with soccer parenting a little bit. But my project right now is really, can we make this sustainable? We realized that it is a need. It crosses all sports. It crosses all levels. So taking that step back from coaching, as I said, is weird. I may go running, screaming it back to it in the fall, but right now it's allowing me to focus on working with so many really neat organizations, all trying to push that needle forward and provide access first to girls to be able to play and then to be involved and engaged in all levels of it. Background wise, grew up, 3-sport athlete because that's what you did. If you played one sport, you played all of them at that generation. There was no specialization in the same way there is now. Soccer was what stuck. Played soccer at Smith College and at the University of Denver, and then had the opportunity to start coaching in college right out of college and really, really enjoyed it. Part of some startup programs, helped to start the program at South Dakota State, which was truly a unique experience and culture shock to move to New York after South Dakota. So I understand that, Emma. I was like, oh, this is a little different. Long Island and South Dakota are not the same. And then just really stayed in it. And I love, sports is such a part of society and every society, and it looks different in different places. And I think for me, that's just the fun, is being able to connect in different communities and learn about different things through sports. And I love learning more. I've already got new terms. I think what we use as progression in soccer, you guys use as scaffolding. So I think that's really interesting to see some of the similarities and differences. I'm guessing that's the same. So I may be totally wrong in interpreting what you said, but that's the word that we use. So it's been really fascinating for me, and I've really enjoyed being able to connect across sports. So that's why we're focusing on it right now.
One final question for both of you before we sign off. what do we need to do to continue to grow the base for coaching opportunities for women? I know that it comes with time. I realize that as the sport becomes more and more popular for female athletes, et cetera, but are there any things that we, as our coaches council looks at this information, many of our coaches council members will probably view the podcast as well. What could we use as a takeaway to say, this is what we could do to assist in coaching opportunities and assist coaches moving forward for female athletes?
Yeah, you go ahead, Sarah.
You sure we don't have a whole other podcast?
Emma wants to think for a moment.
I'm just calming down because there's a lot of
There's a lot in there, Emma. Thanks. I appreciate taking that one. We could do an entire other podcast on this one. I think at least from the sports that I've seen, we're doing a better job of getting young coaches into it. What I'm not seeing as often is those young coaches progressing up the ranks in the same way that we see their male counterparts progressing up the ranks. Looking at soccer, the number of women my age still in coaching drops off a cliff. But we have a lot of 20 and 30 somethings, which we didn't have 20 years ago. So that's amazing. But something happens where we don't start to see them in those next leadership roles, whether it's because we don't perceive them as having the right image, or maybe they have slightly different qualifications from the men. Getting women in those roles will bring more women in. Just because we know where to look. If I'm going to call on my network, a lot of my network is women. So we're going to have women in the mix. But if a guy's going to call on his network, unless he's really conscious to make sure there are women in that mix, his network is going to be the guys he played with or the guys he wrestled with. So that might be a great guy to hire. But when you're continually hiring the same thing, then you are going to keep missing the things that are needed for women, and it's not going to be normal for them. So I don't think there's one magic wand. I think it comes with having these conversations, having the awkward conversations, bringing women in from the playing levels to the young coaching levels, and then bringing them along, holding the standards the same, obviously, but they're not going to be identical. They'll be different. You can still have an equal standard with the experiences being different, because they may not have as many professional opportunities, or they may not have certain other, competitions that they have access to, or the team may be smaller. So there aren't as many women who have those experiences as the men, but they have equal experiences in other ways. And bringing that into it too also broadens your reach. And just seeing women in those positions lets the little girl who's watching when she goes to her brother's meet know that it's okay. I could do that too. I like, my brother's coach is a woman. That's really cool. I want to be like her. Just seeing a woman coaching a men's team. Whenever I got the opportunity to coach men, I always made a point of, if their sisters came to the game, I would say hi to them, because I wanted them to see that. And I think those pieces, they all kind of go together. That's a roundabout way to do it. As Emma sort of acknowledged.
I love that you say hi to the other little girls. That
Absolutely.
is very cool. I love that. I was going to say the education component. Like, I still feel out of place sometimes. I'm comparing myself to a guy who might have done something completely different, who's in a similar role or even in a role lower than me, and feeling like I have to prove that I should be coaching. And so I believe it's like when we have athletes in the sport, it's our job to provide leadership roles for them throughout their opportunity while they're still competitive. So are they mentoring youth athletes? Are they helping design practice plans? Are they learning the X's and O's and how you might put together this? Are you helping them run camps and clinics over the summer and watching them and empowering them to really lead? And then you're in the back, like, hey, that was a really good explanation, but next time, why don't you try and do it just about 30 seconds faster? That way we can keep their attention, and giving them that feedback, and then empowering them by giving them access to coaches courses, whether it's USA Wrestling's amazing system, whether it's getting them signed up to the UWW Academy that's free, and like finding those different ways, because they're going to not value themselves or see themselves in that role because they feel like they have to be fully educated, that they have to have all these accolades. And so how can I make them start to see themselves in that role earlier? How can I stand there and be that mental support and that mentor? Luckily for me, I had Mike and Terry really standing in my corner, pushing and making sure that I was stepping outside of my comfort zone. And then I think the third piece is like finding a peer my age. That was the hardest thing. And honestly, it's like Jackie Davis is my best friend, but she was like one of the first people that I met who was like a young coach, new to this, winging it, just like me, you know. And I could be like, "Yo, are you nervous about this too?" Because I'm really nervous. Like I can't tell Terry. That Terry's gonna be like, "Shut up!" Like just go and do it, you know. So having Jackie and still relying on her as we're like progressing through our coaching career together has been super beneficial. So mentors ahead, mentors the same age, and then just putting them in situations where they have to lead trial by fire, but also supporting them and empowering them with resources, whether it's your own guidance or a formal education setting.
Well, I know I hate to put words in people's mouths, but since Mike can't speak right now.
I don't know what happened.
Oh, there he is. He's back.
No, honestly, it was better that I was not on because it's been great with me off. So I think we've got a new format for next week. Guest and Haggerty.
Now, I can tell you from my perspective, and now I will let Mike speak for himself, but the two words that come to mind after listening to both you, Sarah, and Emma, the two words are inspiring and certainly informative. I mean, what I'm hearing is like this information is very usable. It's not just like, hey, this is matter of fact. This is some good stuff that our coaches need to hear. And so, and then the inspiring side is that you guys bring a ton of energy, both of you. You bring the energy that, as a coach, there's no doubt that there's, I guess the reasons for your successes are obvious. Let's put it that way. So as far as our coaches council, I know that they'll be excited to hear this, and this information will be shared across the lines of USA Wrestling. I couldn't thank you enough for taking the time in this last 50 minutes or so to share the project, your insights on coaching, and where this is all headed. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and we're excited to partner with Beat the Streets. It's amazing. I think it's a good partnership, and we love being able to support what you're doing. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Thank you. I
had a mentor. In closing, I had a mentor that told me, without true feeling of safety, there is no true high performance. And this isn't just about, making sure that girls have the same opportunity to compete in wrestling and learn the same skills. This goes on to women who are abused, who need to be able to get involved with other people to see that pattern of abuse doesn't need to continue, that there are ways to stop it. There are ways to reach out for help. This is so much more than a sport question. This is a society question, and how we treat women and how we show them respect. And I'm going to maybe get her name a little bit off, but Elif Shakar, there's a TED Talk, and I'll try to get it posted on here. She said that if we're scared, don't run from those conversations. And so I hope that the coaches on here, myself included, right, when we feel those nerves coming up, find a peer, find a Sarah, find an Emma, find somebody that knows what's going on, and just say, hey, I'm stupid. I don't know what's going on, but I know that if I talk to you and if you give me some time, that you're going to help me better understand and better provide that safe environment so that these young ladies and young men can all have that opportunity to see what high performance is like. But it's so much more than just X's and O's. So thank you so much for what you're doing to bring this really important issue to light.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess in closing, on behalf of our USA Wrestling Coaches Council, I'd like to thank, our special guests, Sarah and Emma, for joining us. And we look forward to having open communication down the road. And hopefully we can get you guys back on sometime and kind of give us some updates and tell us all the good stuff that's taken place. So until next time, everybody, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.